Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. We are going to be reviewing a pet food today on request. So if you are excited to learn about a senior option for canines, stick around because that's what we're going to be doing today. Welcome to my channel. For those of you that are new, my name is Dr. Ray. I have this YouTube channel where I entertain your pet related questions, as long as they're not medical, specific medical questions pertaining to your pet. I entertain all questions. So I can entertain your food questions. I can entertain your questions on medications. I can entertain your questions on diseases. But a lot of your questions recently have been revolving around pet food. And so I am happy to answer those. I do this channel on request. And so these foods that I review, and I'm going to use that term review very loosely. It's more of a educational session on what I think you should be looking for, and then we use the food that was requested to kind of facilitate that learning process. So think of this channel as, when you have a textbook and you read through a chapter and you learn how to do something in that, maybe that math textbook, and then at the end of the textbook chapter, you've got a series of questions that you do, and then at the end of the book, they have the answers. That's what we're doing today. We are going to learn the process, then we're going to do an example, and then at the end, we are going to learn the answer, which is going to be the score on Dr. Ray's pet food scoring system. It is a system I came up with to help focus us. And so we're going to have, those horse blinders on where we are not going to get distracted by a lot of the marketing gimmicks that are out there, because that is what is confusing to people. Years ago, people were not confused about pet food. Why were they not confused? Because we didn't have this pressure on us by pet food marketing to be guilty about what we're feeding, and that if we don't feed this, our pet is going to die, and we're a horrible pet parent. That's not the case. In fact, I want to let you guys know, I don't think any foods, even if they score low on Dr. Ray's pet food scoring system, that your pet is going to die. I see dogs all the time that have, in my practice, horrible diets. Chihuahuas that eat nothing but hot dogs every day and, can lead a good and healthy life. But statistically, that may not be the case. So what I am showing you today is numbers that if you fall into them, yes, statistically, pets do better if they're maintained in these numbers. Obviously, there are outliers on every single aspect. Every single aspect of life, there's outliers. I look at a blood panel, and there's always a reference range, and there are those dogs or those cats that consistently fall outside of the reference range. Just, that's just normal for them. And the same thing is happening in pet food. If you're not feeding what the marketing companies tell you is the perfect food, your pet is not going to keel over and die. I know that's what they want you to think, and maybe my marketing is not as good as their marketing, but maybe after today's video, you will feel a little bit more confident in using common sense and using your brain and not necessarily using your heart, which has been maybe manipulated by some of these other outside factors, to help make a decision that you feel comfortable with, or even just opening a dialogue that you feel comfortable with having with your personal veterinarian. And so that's what this channel is about. I use the term review, but really it's more of a learning process. And so the learning process we're going to jump into today by request. And the request is by Miss Debbie Porter 1513. She said, can you look at Purina Pro Plan 7 Plus, Science Diet 7 Plus, and maybe Origin? Senior food is confusing as all the others. And so I do think it's more difficult to find a senior food because there are more delicate parameters that you need to fall into. It is harder for a company to fall into the ideal parameters for a senior because the reference range is shrunk down. They have very specific needs for their particular area of life. And so we're going to try to see how the Science Diet 7 Plus stacks up today, and then maybe in some future videos we'll look at the Purina Pro Plan 7 Plus and the Origin as well. So let's go over to the Science Diet website, hillspet.com. You see the package there. Got the dog, can't really tell if it's a senior or not. Big Science Diet on the logo, adult 7 Plus. They show you a picture of the kibble. And then this is a chicken and barley recipe. So a lot of their recipes are chicken and barley. I know their regular adult one is as well. We're not going to go through the graphics. We're going to come over here and we're going to utilize Dr. Ray's pet food scoring system. to evaluate this food on a couple parameters. So I'll flash the scorecard up here and you can see the parameters we're going to be evaluating. I feel like if the food gets a 7, 8, 9, or 10, that's maybe an option to consider. If it gets lower than that, I'm worried that some of the big picture is being missed. And maybe some of the marketing has overshadowed some of the actual nutrition in the food. So that's what the pet food scoring system is going to help us do today. So first thing that we're going to look for is this food grain-free or raw, and it is not. That may be appropriate for your pet. This food channel information that I give you, even if we talk about diseases or medications and things like that, it's based on what a normal pet general population would be appropriate. And so those parameters, grain-free and raw, are not appropriate for the general population. Maybe in the context of a personal conversation with your vet, they may be appropriate. But for this channel, you get 2 points if you're not grain-free or raw. So starting out with that, they're going to get 2 points. Key benefits, all marketing there. We're not going to even pay attention to that. Again, we're bypassing marketing. We talked about the ingredients. Let's go into the feeding guide. Feeding guide is important because we want to make sure that a pet food company basically knows how to calculate how much you should be feeding your pet. How can you be making a pet food and not know how to calculate a pet's resting energy requirement? And so that's why it's important to me. Also helps us make sure that they're recommending to you the right amount to feed. Like the old wives' tale, they put more on the package than what you should be feeding so they can sell you more dog food or cat food. We don't want that. So I like to make sure that the calculations are correct. So over here we got a 20-pound dog is recommended to get 1.5 cups per day. On this channel we use 20 pounds because we've calculated many times. If you want to learn how to calculate it, I have a video dedicated on that you can check out my foundationals playlist on calculating resting energy requirement. Otherwise, you just need to take my word today that the resting energy requirement for a 20-pound dog is 366. So we want to see if this 1.5 cups is close to or equal to 366 kcal. So for that, we need to find the average nutrient and calorie content. They're saying 353 kcals per cup. It can actually go up to 538 if you're using the multiplier. Again, if you don't know what that verbiage means, you need to check out that resting energy requirement video, but it is a range for to account for the energy expenditure of the animal. So 363 if you have a very sedentary, obese, spay or neutered dog, up to 538 if you have a moderately active or maybe even intact dog. So 1.5 cups at 353, 528. So if you have an intact dog, a dog that's moderately exercised, I would feed the 1.5 cups. If you have a dog that is prone to obesity, spayed, neutered, maybe he's inside most of the time, very rarely goes out for walks, even if a dog that maybe use potty pads up in that smaller weight range, I would shy a little bit less than what they're recommending to feed. So you will have to calculate the resting energy requirement, but they do get a point because they were in that 538 if you use the multiplier. So that brings us up to 3 points so far. Next thing we need to look at is the AFCO statement. What is the AFCO statement? It is the feeding adequacy statement as set forth by the regulating body, which is the American Association for Feed. What is it? American Association for Feed. The Association of American Feed Control Officials. What does AFCO stand for? It stands for the American Association of Feed Control Officials. And so it's a governing body that controls basically what's on the pet label to make sure that there's no false claims on pet food labeling. They are not concerned, which is a very false misconception that a lot of people think. They're not concerned with the nutrition that's actually in the food. They are more concerned with labeling and is the pet food delivering what it says it's going to deliver? Is it delivering something that is not going to cause your pet to be deficient and you're spending this money and there's nothing in the food? That's what they're worried about. That's why the ranges for AFCO very often have minimums but no maximums. We're not using that on this channel. We are using data-driven information from Small Animal Clinical Nutrition, which is the textbook that we use that has all the data and all the studies, and everything is published and listed in that text. And so I'm going to flash up the chart when we get to the guaranteed analysis. for those ideal numbers, we're not going to be using AFCO. But for the AFCO statement, we are going to be using AFCO because they're the one that substantiate that what is in this statement is true. And so animal feeding tests using AFCO procedures substantiate that the Hill Science Diet 7+ chicken meal, barley, and rice recipe provides complete and balanced nutrition for maintenance of adult dogs. And so 2 very important things here. One, this food underwent feeding trials. They not only took the time to formulate the food and come up with the actual parameters they wanted it to meet, they actually fed this food to dogs, followed them, made sure everything was working properly, the palatability was right, there weren't any major things that were wrong with it. Even though this doesn't happen, foods that are formulated, they don't feed those to animals before they go out in the market. At least they don't do it in a regulated way. And so it's quite possible if you feed a formulated food, your dog could be the very first dog that ever, ate the food. Now, is that likely? No. But it just, it says something to a company that's taken the time and the effort to do that because it's not required. And so they're going above and beyond. A lot of these companies want to say, oh, we meet or exceed AFCO guidelines. Yeah, that's not a great thing because over and exceeding nutrients, we can have an issue there. There is there's an ideal range, there's a perfect range. But when you overdo service, you overdo effort, that's a good thing. And so that's what we're seeing here with the Science Diet Adult 7+. They're going to get 2 points for the AFCO statement, and that doesn't happen very often. So let me write that here, and let me talk a little bit about the AFCO statement in seniors in general. There are only, I believe, 4 life stages that you will see on an AFCO statement. You will see an AFCO statement profile for all life stages, which is all the life stages lumped into one, and no, that's not a good thing. You will see pregnant and lactating. You will see large breed puppy, and then you will see adult. Senior is not a definable life stage according to AFCO because why? What we just talked about. They're not concerned with what is optimal. They're concerned with meeting the minimums. And senior dogs, they need a very specific healthy profile. And so AFCO is not concerned with defining that for them. But we are on this channel, and so we're going to do that. But you just need to know if you are searching high and low for an AFCO statement that says for senior dogs, you're not going to find it. You're going to need to use the numbers that I'm going to provide to you, and you're going to need to take those numbers and evaluate them yourself. So that's why this says adult dogs and why I'm giving them a point for that, even though it doesn't say senior, because you're not going to find one that says senior. Okay, so now we're up to 5 points as we go into the guaranteed analysis. And so that's pretty good. If they get all the points for the guaranteed analysis, this will get a perfect 10. And then, that means it's got good basic bones. And then after that, you guys can start devouring and picking through all the various other things that are important to you. And we're not going to get into those in this video, but we are going to get into the nutrients now. So the first thing that you're going to see and that is important to pay attention to when you're evaluating these pet foods is the metabolizable energy. That's the kcals per kilogram. And if you have a food that's really super nutrient dense, it's going to skew the numbers because the standards we are evaluating on are based on a 35 to 4,000 kcal per kilogram metabolizable energy. We're okay here. And you do need to be checking that every time you do these evaluations. The second thing that you need to be paying attention for is that you're using the nutrients on a dry matter basis. A lot of companies will list the guaranteed analysis, which is minimums and maximums. That's what they're required to list, but we don't want that. We want a dry matter basis because that's what the standards are on. What does that mean? All the moisture is taken out. Even dry food has moisture. If we want to evaluate a dry food compared to a canned food, compared to a semi-moist food, compared to a freeze-dried food, all those things, the best way and the only way to do it is to take that moisture out and make everything on an even scale. And so this is already listed here on a dry matter basis for us, so we don't have to do any conversions or calls or anything like that. So let's pull up the senior standards. Okay, so for the senior dog, we want a low to moderate protein. It's going to help extend the life of our kidneys. It's going to provide enough protein where the body is going to maintain that muscle mass, but not overload the kidneys where they're working and we're getting excess protein levels that the kidneys actually just become pooped out and basically just kick them out in the urine. A lot of people are under the misconception that when a dog gets older and they get skinnier, which is the natural progression of life, you need to be giving more protein because the body needs all that protein to build muscle. That's not true, because the reason why your senior dog is losing muscle mass isn't because all of a sudden at this time of life its energy requirements for protein got higher. That's not why that's happening physiologically. What's happening is the body has lost its ability to utilize those proteins. So just think of it this way, a visual. You have a room and your dog is sitting in that room, and all these blocks are in the room, and the blocks are there for your dog's body to utilize, and those blocks are proteins, and they can take a block anytime they need it and utilize it. And it does that its whole life. And so it takes blocks, you add blocks, takes blocks, add blocks. Maybe there's always a balance of about 10 blocks. Every time your dog uses 2 blocks, you feed it again, 2 more blocks come. Okay, great. As your dog becomes a senior, it forgets how to utilize those blocks. It's not able to utilize them. So what happens? Maybe it's only eating taking one of those protein blocks per day, and then you add 2 more. So now what? Now we've got 13 blocks in there, and then the next day it only uses 1 block, and we add 2 more, and now we've got 15, and so on and so forth and so forth. So eventually that room gets filled with all of these blocks, and there's no room in there for your dog to even live. It's all smashed in there because it's only taking 1, and every day we're adding 2. Okay, so what happens? We start kicking them out. We start kicking those blocks out. That takes energy. We've got to carry those heavy blocks and throw them out. Every day we got to do more and more and more and more, and they're just building up and just crowding all on top of us. That's exhausting. That's what's happening to the kidneys when we are just adding more protein. We're getting skinnier. Take more, take more, take more, and the body just gets overwhelmed. And I know that it makes sense to the layperson, and I'm not saying it's your fault that you're a layperson and you don't understand these things. That's why it's important to discuss these with your veterinarian. This is one of those things that makes sense if you don't understand the physiology of the body. And the physiology of the body is the more protein you give a tired kidney, the more work those kidneys are doing because it's kicking out those proteins. Body's not storing it, body's not utilizing it, just making the body more tired. And so when we have pets that have kidney disease or protein losing enteropathy or protein losing nephropathy, the treatment for that is moderate to low protein. Okay, and so I'm not going to get into that disease process any more than that because it requires a lot of underlying knowledge that I don't expect you guys to have. That's why, quite honestly, as a veterinarian, you pay me to do that. That's my job. That's not your job. I don't change the oil on my car. I don't know how to do that. My mechanic doesn't expect me to know how to do that. I pay him to do that, and we're both happy, and that's the relationship we have, and that's the relationship you need to have with your veterinarian. And that's the relationship we want to have with you. And so that is the reason why, I know hopefully that was a good visual, but that's the reason why protein in the senior dog you're going to find is a little bit less. They don't need that to put on weight. It's not because the protein's not there why they're not putting on weight. It's because of other disease process and the natural aging process of the body. So with the senior diet, we want to support that because we know that we're not going to necessarily be able to override that. So Science Diet Senior is providing 18.7% protein, which is going to be exactly in the reference range for what we want. So we're going to give them a point for that. Fat in the senior dog set between 7 and 15, 13.7 is we're gonna get a point for that. That is in in the ideal range. Sometimes for these guys, what they need is a little bit extra fat, maybe to put a little bit more meat on their bones. So we're getting a point there. Fiber in the senior dog becomes important. We do see a lot of issues with constipation and just motility of the GI tract and stuff that responds best to a little bit of higher fiber. So we want that fiber greater than 2%, and it's at 2.4, so we're going to get a point there. So we're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now. 2 points left that we can glean, and that's on the minerals, which are exceedingly important again for the senior dog. Same thing we talked about with the protein. Minerals is the same thing. The more you overload the body with minerals, the harder it is for the kidneys to function, and then they get tired and they get pooped out and they get weak, and it's just a downward spiral from there. So the minerals are very important, and it's specifically important for our senior pets. So for calcium, we want those minerals between 0.25 and 0.75, and the phosphorus between 0.5 and 1. So here the calcium we've got at 1.16. is going to be a little bit in excess, so they're not going to get the point there. And then phosphorus at 0.68, we are going to get the point there. So we were a little bit excessive on the calcium, quite a bit excess on the calcium. We would have liked to see that, closer to 0.75. Unfortunately, they're not going to meet the mark there, but we do meet the mark on the phosphorus. So that's going to bring the Science Diet Senior 7+ formula up to a 9, the only point deducted for the calcium value. So I hope that that was useful to you to learn how to work through these foods. You have the chart now. That chart's in Small Animal Clinical Nutrition, link down below. You can read through the chapter on feeding the senior dog, and those numbers will be there for you. And now you can take this information and you can utilize it to evaluate any senior food, as long as it's on a dry matter basis, to the Science Diet 7+. So, the Purina Pro Plan she asked for and the Origin. We may dive into those next time, but now you know how to do it. So I hope you enjoyed. There is a pretty decent option for your senior dog. If you enjoyed this and you enjoyed learning how to work through these type of foods in this type of video, please sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell. We hang out here on the Nutrition Nation every Thursday, and have fun learning and discussing these things together. So I will see you guys next time. And